Hey, everybody, and welcome to another meeting of the Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group. Tonight, we are excited to welcome in Jacoby. Many of you may know him as I Am Jacoby Online. He's gained quite a popularity and following lately as a ethical hacker who's done some really fantastic things in the community, and we're excited to have him sharing with us tonight. So first off, let's say welcome. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing exceptionally well. It's been a good couple of weeks, couple months for me for sure.
Yeah. So Jacoby is trying to thaw out. It's not the warmest where he is right now. We were talking privately before this started, so we're gonna get him all excited so he warms up and he doesn't care about how cold it is at home and all the snow. And so Jacoby, what are we gonna be talking about tonight? What's the scope of the demo this evening?
Um, okay, so it basically can all boil down to one thing. So we all use PowerShell, I apologize, with different end goals in mind. But for someone like me, PowerShell is referred to something as a LOL bin, which is a living off the land binary. Um, Learning to program or to make malware or to whatever pen test method you come up with, if you can do it in PowerShell, that means you don't have to compile something like a Python script and bring it in. So I took the step forward and decided to make PowerShell my main language after some years, and I just kind of fell in love with it, and it's just kind of got me to where I am right now. And I'm gonna try to show you some of the cool things that I found out along the way.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. I'm very excited to see what you have to share. So let me just give you an interesting perspective. Phil and myself are essentially admins. And so many of the meetings that we host here are focused from an administrative point of view. And we have had in the past a few security focused people that come on and share stuff with us. And it is amazing to us to see how the minds of someone from a security standpoint thinks to use PowerShell and the OS completely different than how I focus on using the OS every day. So I would expect that you're probably going to share some stuff about using PowerShell and things that are offered in the OS and applications that typically we wouldn't think of using as vectors for ways into doing things. That's probably a fair statement, right?
Yeah, you would be pretty shocked to learn the different methods that we're using, or slash trying to prevent. Again, a lot of this, anything that I can, I do submit reports on. But to put emphasis, I specialize in payloads that are used on devices that are meant to do HID-based attacks, and these type of attacks are not taken seriously at all, despite how easy it is to get into supposedly secure places and use any one of these devices. But that's just something to keep in mind. A lot of my stuff is centered around in person. Not to say that it doesn't have practical application outside of that, but that is where I center it.
Cool. All right. Well, so we don't want to delay any longer. We want to turn it over to you, let you do your thing. I am sure we're going to have a pretty active chat, and so we'll ping you if we have questions that someone's waiting, dying to get an answer on. But otherwise, we'll hand it over to you and take it away.
Hey, yeah, go ahead and share my screen. Give me one sec. All right, it should be sharing.
Yep, we see Obsidian.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this is Obsidian. This is probably my new favorite note-taking app, and it can be used for post-exploitation data analysis as well, which is just wild. That's a whole nother project in itself. Maybe I can show off one day.
And you already got me curious because I'm an Obsidian user as well. So
Yeah, so you know the Obsidian, the graph view, right?
yeah.
Just imagine using that, if you were to collect a bunch of intel off of a bunch of different individuals and how you could organize it inside of here.
30 seconds in, and I'm already like, God damn it! I never thought of anything like that. If
Yeah,
the graph
it's
was essentially useless to me right now.
correct. Yeah, but Obsidian has webhooks now as well. So if you had some sort of exfil on whatever payload you have and it got sent to your Obsidian vault, you can then use that to data mine it along with like two of the other plugins that I use for like a data view And I forgot the other one is off the top of my head, but DataView is a good one.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to come back and join us this fall for Jacoby's talk on Obsidian and how you can use it to.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I love Obsidian so much, and then it's the way that you can display information is so beautiful. You know, since it is markup, putting in charts or whatever else, it's wild.
Yeah.
But again, so what I specialize in is I program special HID attack devices. If you can see my camera, these are two of the common ones that I use. They probably won't focus in too well. One of them is the OMG plug. One of them is the USB rubber ducky, which has been around for some time now. More popular right now is a lot of people are using the flipper and using its bad USB capabilities to do these similar things. But these
So
attacks.
let me
Go
just
ahead.
stop you there for a second. What's special about those particular devices that makes them attractive?
Oh, correct, correct. I should explain that. Yes. So basically, any of these HID attack devices, they are USB drives that are programmed in a way to be recognized as keyboards. These devices are recognized as keyboards, but they're pre-programmed to type in commands at lightning speeds. The OMG cable / plug, for example, types in 140 characters a second. So imagine typing a script into, opening PowerShell, typing in whatever script, whatever you want, grabbing whatever you want, sending it wherever you want, and doing that in a matter of seconds, and then turning around and walking away. These are the devices that I program specifically, and because Windows is the attack platform, PowerShell is the attack vector that I use with these devices specifically, which is what got me into PowerShell originally.
Okay. And so let me just ask another question, if you don't mind. Since I'm not a security guy and I don't think the same way that you do, those devices that you were talking about, they're programmed to do X. I understand that. Is that for security purposes only, or is there a practical usage that would be used for a regular user and a security person discovered a way to use that to their advantage? Like, why would I buy that for myself if I'm not doing sort of security focused work?
Okay, so initially the rubber ducky, the first gen of it, it wasn't for security, it was for automation.
Gotcha.
Darren was using the rubber ducky to automate the process of setting up a bunch of different systems in their network, going from computer to computer instead of doing it manually. He just automated the process with the ducky and would go from computer to computer. And that's probably the biggest practical application. But I have a few practical application uses that I use it for that might not be as practical for regular people, I suppose. But there definitely are practical applications, but that is definitely not its main purpose, obviously.
Understood. All right.
Okay, so yeah, so anyways, these devices, like I said, what they do is they replicate a keyboard, and you can pre-program it to type out specific things. As soon as you plug it in, it types in window R, opens up the run box, and can type something in the run box, right? So there are two different ways to utilize this attack. Either A, or I'll say two main ways. Either A, keystroke injection attack, which is just as I just described it. You GUI R, type in PowerShell, hit enter, open PowerShell, type in a script, hit enter, run it, Alt F4, whatever, close out. That is a straight HID keystroke injection based attack. Now that is that showcases its capabilities in its most basic format. The next way and most common way that scripts are executed using these devices is, just using the simple invoke REST method, invoke web request, pulling down a script from a malicious URL and piping it into invoke expression. And I definitely forgot to put the pipe symbol here in the image. But using aliases, this is basically what a payload would look like. This is all that needs to be typed into a run box to pull a payload down from the internet somewhere and execute it onto a system. So that right there is the number of characters. And if you remember, I said it types it out at 140 characters a second. So something like this is, executed sub 1 second. and you can walk away and that script is now active and running on the target system. So that is the delivery method that I particularly use. That's not to say that the same PowerShell scripts that I deliver in that way cannot be delivered in other methods and still be just as effective. This is just how I personally showcase them. Now, whenever we're using IWR to grab a URL and piping it into IEX, we're not even touching memory. That's the way that most scripts will operate if they don't have any sort of dependencies, any sort of images. I have some of mine that are just funny. They'll change your desktop wallpaper to a scary image when you move your mouse and then play a scary noise. So it's just a jump scare. But for those particular payloads, when there are dependencies, these dependencies have to be downloaded to a specific folder somewhere. It has to be easy to access and universal. So there are particular places that people who use these devices and these attack methods always go to. So if there were places that you wanted to, for example, create extra rules to monitor those locations to protect yourself against these kind of attacks, these would be the places that you'd look for, keeping in mind that this would be protecting against people who are just grabbing these scripts and running them, not the people who know what they're doing. So they're, modifying that location to be something universal, but more specific. But it's honestly those people who are just grabbing and running what they don't know what it is that are more dangerous. They're just reckless. So the directories to look out for is literally just the temp directory in the root, the temp directory that's stored in your environment variable with the temp directory, and then your app data folder inside of your environment variables. Those are the three most common locations. For these specific locations, I have different scripts where I'll run something like in here, I have one called Watcher, which I basically just use to monitor certain folders and pay attention for anything that's dropped in there, certain file types, if anything's ran from there. And those would be basic ways to protect yourself from those kind of attacks from low-level users.
So can I ask a quick question here? Just like with this,
Absolutely.
these attacks are using an HID, using a keyboard jerk, but that's while the user's logged in. So walking up to a computer but if the computer is not logged in, there's other things that you'd have to do to inject that, because will the OS acknowledge those keyboards and do all that without a login and all that other stuff?
So if you are not logged into the system, you would use a different device.
Okay.
Now, if you knew what their login was, obviously keystroke injection it, right? Sometimes you shoulder surf a PIN number or something, right? Whatever it may be. Now, if you absolutely don't have any access and you're on the login screen, that doesn't mean that you can't get in. That means that you just have to use a different device. These two guys right here that might not come into focus, these are the bash bunnies that are offered through Hack5. They look like USB devices, but they're little Linux computers. They're single board Linux computers. And these devices can act as a few more different types of devices other than just a keyboard. They can act as any HID device, an Ethernet port, or an Ethernet device, I apologize. And using that device, it is possible to dump password hashes from the login screen. In which case you would have to, decrypt them, whatnot. But it's not hard. It's a matter of grabbing the hash that is supposed to be the difficult part. Once you have it, it's pretty much over.
Thank you. And so that first device you were showing, that's the typical drop a device in the parking lot. Hopefully someone picks it up, they plug in their computer, and they've essentially invited you into their computer without you having to do anything.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Along those lines. Now, because of its advanced so much, that's not so much something they do as much, like the Gen 1 rubber duckies. It's something that you'd see them do is they would drop them in parking lots and hope that someone picked them up and they would auto run. But the new rubber ducky that just came out, for example, at DEF CON this last year in August, it was launched. It actually introduced logic into the HID attack surface, whereas before, the only way you would get logic is by, running a PowerShell script specifically, like if you downloaded one or typed it in the window. The new rubber ducky, which is the one that I was just showing you, the new rubber ducky, it has logic. So it has OS detection, so it can go into different systems, or it has logic to determine when certain key states are active. It has the ability to exfil data even with air-gapped systems by using the numlock, scroll lock, and caps lock as Morse code to signal to the device the data that's being exfilled. So with the advancements with it, there are different ways of delivering, I guess, these payloads outside of the drop method. For drop method, people like to, use little Arduino boards or something else, something really disposable. DigiSparks, you can use them. You could put a single payload on them. They're $2 a piece, size of a postage stamp. You can walk by, stick it in the computer, walk away, and never see it again. No big deal.
Jacoby, I've got a question for you.
Are you unmuted?
How do these devices, the capabilities of the devices you're talking about, and the recently released ones at DEF CON, how do they compare to known state-sponsored devices as far as capabilities?
Well, to use one as like a very specific example, the OMG cable that came out, that was one of the devices that got leaked back in like 2013, I want to say maybe. That device itself was straight keystroke injection. It did not have wireless capabilities, nothing like that. And the cables themselves were going for about $20,000 a piece. Whereas now, you can get the OMG cable, $180. It can store up to 200 individual payloads. You can connect to the cable with your phone, so you can, run payloads remotely. But it's not even just that. On top of that, you can tether the current cable to a known network that's nearby, and then you can tunnel into the cable from anywhere in the world. So you have remote access from anywhere through a C2 server. So I imagine maybe there's some more stuff in development that's kind of hidden that might be more advanced, but as far as comparisons to what like Hack5 offers to what I think, we'll say like nation states have, I don't think that they could be too far ahead, if at all, to be honest, with the team that's behind the devices that are being put out currently.
So Jacoby, you're talking to a crowd that deals in security but doesn't have a security first focus for a lot of these things. So there's probably lots of things that you're comfortable talking about that we don't even understand. Like, for example, explain what's Hack5.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, so Hack5 is the company that makes all of the devices that I was just showing you. They've been around since about 2009, and they're pretty much the go-to for devices. There's a company or two that might make a single device, or they try to make clones or whatever it is, but Hack5 has just become the go-to for these devices, for these payloads. Almost all these devices use DuckyScript, which is, like a scripting language that Hack5 developed. So even if they didn't make the device, like for example, the flipper uses an unlicensed DuckyScript. So they're kind of behind any and all these devices for the most part. I think your mic might be muted.
Mike, we can't hear you.
I think says I'm.
There we go.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So I was going to say, so we jumped into this pretty quick, and I apologize. I didn't give you an opportunity to kind of speak about your background a little bit. I was going to say that I believe you write exploits and share them with the community to help people learn about security and how to basically have better security posture, right? So one of the things that people can do is help support your work by, if they want to purchase some of these devices, they can go through some links that you have available on your website, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I have an affiliate link with them in
Yeah. So at some point, even if it's later on, just make sure you share those with the chat or mention them online so that if people want to support your work, they have a way to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so now with these devices, again, the main way that scripts are run and executed is using IWR, pulling them down and just piping them to IEX. Now, of course, a lot of people are, that are put in positions where they gotta think of security to any capacity. They would just use the PowerShell constrained language or something, or put something in place so that these random scripts aren't being run. I know that some people might think execution policy, but just to remind you, you can change the execution policy right from the run box. So, that doesn't really matter. And, again, unless you have something else in place. Now, with that in mind, though, once you have something in place to try to deter from people just doing something as simple as invoking down a payload and executing it on your system, are there different ways to get these payloads on your system that aren't as obvious? And the answer is, of course, yes. There are so many different things to exploit, and people just don't do anything about them. This next one I'm going to show you, I wrote a report up for Microsoft. I submitted it, and they determined that it wasn't actionable, which is fine. That's their decision to make. But yeah, it's kind of a little terrifying what you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up PowerShell console here. We're going to. All right, so I made a module and I just named it TPL. So we're going to go ahead and Alt W, move that to there, clear. I made a module and I just called it TPL. TPL stands for test payload. So if we do find module and test payload, it'll give us the version, the name, the repository, and actually it should have the description over there. But that's fine. So I imagine everybody being PowerShell, you're probably familiar with, the PowerShell gallery and how you submit modules, and how it's a universal library that everybody has access to, assuming you have, the NuGet installed in your system. One of the things that you can do with the PowerShell gallery is make a description of your module. A description is a space where you have up to 4,000 characters. That's a lot of characters, by the way. You have up to 4,000 characters to talk about the module you've made. Now, if all those characters are there, it means you could put whatever you want inside of it. Whatever you want. Like, let's say that you were to put a payload inside the description of a module. In order to use a module, you have to download it. You have to say, yes, I want to download it, and go through the whole process. Or you can make a module, you could put your payload in the description, you can just query that, save it to a variable, execute it, and go from there. So that is what I've done here. So inside of the description of this module, I made a function that's just called !C, and it takes a parameter. The parameter it takes from the pipeline. Now, what I do is I pass it a number, and I have a switch statement. So I got 4 numbers, and these are the name of functions. I just named them the numbers for ease here. So I pass in the number for the function, and then it executes whichever one of them, or in whatever order that I want. So if you see here, we're just going to preface it with IEX the same way, instead of just grabbing the description. And then once we grab it, so this function is loaded into our system, we'll pass it a range. So we're going to go through functions 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to pass that into our function to execute them. So when I run this, it does command 1, 2, and 3. Command 1, 2, and 3. Now you could pass this an array or whatever else, but I have up to 4,000 characters to load in whatever malware, whatever payloads, whatever else that I want. And I have access to it from the PowerShell gallery without actually downloading anything. So this is just one of the techniques that we use. This one's becoming a little bit more common. I gotta be honest, I'd never seen it before I did it. I did try to report it. It was something that they weren't interested in fixing. But I know it's just like a regular data query, but there's rules and suggestions we kind of put in place that we tried to help them make it happen. But yeah, that is just kind of one way. Another way that we use to grab data from somewhere to pull it down and execute it that is often overlooked is going through DNS Text Records on a website. So, sorry about that. So this is my actual DNS Text Record set up for my website online right now. I leave these up just because I have a video going over it and I let people experiment and try them out. There's a couple of different ways that you can run this. I have it set so you can either take named variables for payloads, or you can take numbers, so you get set up for ranges, again, just like you just saw at the PowerShell gallery, so you can do ranges of functions to execute. So these are just the simple DNS text records that are hosted online from my website. 1, just echo line 1, 2, and 3 echo an example where you run it, just says you've successfully done it. And then this funny little one right here, which literally is a PowerShell script that will make you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yeah. So yeah, I just open up forms, open up the URL. YouTube has the whole # sub confirmation equals 1 enter you can put on a URL, which will pop up the box that says, are you sure you want to subscribe? Send keys to put tab twice and enter. And you're now subscribed to my YouTube channel. So that's a fun one I threw in the video and told them they should try it out. You know what I'm saying? They should try it out. So this is how the records are set up. Move this over. Again, just a little screenshot. These are how the records are set up. Now, pull up in, I got my, now once we have these in place, what we're going to do is pulling one down and executing is easy enough. Now there is a character limit for each one of those of 255 characters. So if you're going to attempt to run any sort of script that's going to be longer than that, you have to combine them. So that is what this simple command does right here. Takes a range of whatever you want it to. I have 1 through 3 as the example. We'll resolve a DNS name to cycle through each one of them, look for the text record, grab the strings from it, create a script block from what we grab, and then execute it. So this will pull down multiple DNS records in a row. So if we run this, it just line 1, line 2, line 3. And then again, if you see here, it just echoes line 1, line 2, line 3. And again, those can be whatever commands you want. One that does a recon, one that checks to see if RDP is enabled. If RDP is enabled, then do number 4, which is exploit RDP, whatever it is. You can set up pretty much as many text records as you want. So, you can do a whole system based off logic, and DNS queries are often overlooked. Very, very often. I have, one of my best friends is a CFO for a pen testing company, cybersecurity firm rather. And after I posted that video, they started using it on jobs, and like they were just telling me like how ridiculously easy it was, like just a breeze. Before that was something they had to plan out, but it's just so ridiculously overlooked.
How much room do you have in the text record for actual characters?
Yeah, so it's a 255 character limit per text record.
Wow.
which is why, it's why I had to write that function so you could go through a range, pull them down, combine them, and then execute them. But that's easy enough. That's just creating an array of numbers or whatever it is. It's just your execution order. So it's really easy. It's modular. Um, just incredibly easy to take advantage of. Now, also with PowerShell and with sysadmins, there's often rules that are set in place that are used to attempt to stop something like this, used to stop these type of attacks, or used to just stop these techniques in general. So something that's really common for us hackers is learning how to obfuscate your code. And, PowerShell obviously doesn't do it intentionally, but they have implemented a lot of features that have made it really easy for us to do this. So some things that, some of them you guys might recognize because they're from a long time ago. Right here, we have a path to one of my stager scripts, one of my directories. Now, if I'm wanting to either hide or obfuscate this directory whenever I'm executing this payload, one of the things that you can do is stop each individual segment can be stopped at 6 characters and then followed up by a ~1. This is something from Windows way back when there was a limit to the number of characters and file paths. It is still able to be used, but this is one of the techniques that you can use to shorten and obfuscate file paths that you're manipulating. This works for registry keys. Often there are rules in place that, hey, if this is modified, if this is blah, blah, blah. These kind of obfuscation techniques are the little things that we use to try to get around the rules for things like that. And this can be combined with others, mixed back and forth. Another thing is that environment variables inside of PowerShell, they take wildcards. So you can either use a question mark to replace specific characters, or again, you can use the asterisks, like we know, to replace clusters of characters. One of the examples of this being that is just simply environment variable C*8*, but it resolves out to be the full file path for the common files. So when we were talking earlier about how there are certain directories that are commonly used, like the temp directory or in either place, or the app data folder, these are different ways that we would try to either use that same folder or use a directory inside of it, but then obfuscate it as well to avoid detection or certain rules that are in place to catch these types of things. And then there's another one. This one is a lot harder to work with. So you'll see System Windows Forms here. System Windows Forms. So whenever you're working with like a .NET framework or certain methods, you can use asterisks to wipe out huge chunks of the characters. This is something that's really common in code golfing, and code golfing is also very popular amongst hackers, but is very, very hated among the casual PowerShell community that I have learned, or at least in my experience. Obviously, full written out code is better for public projects, etc. But for what we do, that's not always the case, and it's not a fan favorite. So that is 3 of the different techniques that we'll use inside of PowerShell to obfuscate either file paths, methods, environment variables, just as an extra layer to hide whatever it is that we're doing. Now, some of these, they go to an extra level, and it is actually shocking the ingenuity behind some of the people that come up with some of these techniques. So we've gone over different ways to obfuscate the, the file paths or, the environment variables, but there are also additional levels that you can go to and different methods that you can use to hide the payloads themselves as well. One of these options is using something called a polyglot file. If you are not familiar, a polyglot file is a file that the extension of it could be interpreted differently depending on the program that is opening up the file. So you could have, on the malicious side of things, you could have an image that's also a JavaScript file. So when the image opens, the JavaScript executes as well. Probably the main one, the most common attack vector one, is when you combine an HTA file and a link file. During the process of this, what makes it dangerous is that it removes the little shortcut arrow from a link file. So if you make that link file, make it just look like a regular image, just another picture on the desktop, it will not have that shortcut arrow. And when it's opened, it could be set to open that image that's stored someplace else in the temp directory and run something behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of one of those. This right here, it says h.png, so we're going to go ahead and open it. It says save this image and change the extension to a zip. And why this specific project right here is so absolutely beautiful is polyglot files are an art in themselves. Like, for someone to go through a hex editor and find all the endians and where they're at and find out where they can place extra data, like, it's just absolutely brilliant. These guys are geniuses. But what puts this on another level is this image. Again, I'll go ahead and open it for you. This image can be uploaded to Twitter, and then from Twitter, you can right-click on it. You can download this image right onto your desktop. And when it's downloaded onto your desktop, we're going to go to it. We're going to press F2, and we're going to change the file extension to a zip. I hit enter. It's going to say, are you sure? I'm going to say yes. Yes, I am. And it turns into a zip. So this is the Python script that you use to pack a zip inside of an image. But I can put whatever scripts I want into here, inside of it, change it to a PNG. You sure? Yep. And now it's an image again. And now I can download it onto your system from Twitter, through an email, whatever it is, whatever I want. And there's some code, obviously, I'm not going to show, but I can open that folder without decompressing the zip and execute what's inside of it. With admin permissions, possibly, bypass execution policy, obviously. But yeah, it's really hard to detect something like this, especially when I can also then convert that to base 64 and nest that inside something else or whatever else it is. A lot of the more sophisticated attacks, you'll see that they've got things layered and layered and layered. And yeah, these are some of the techniques that they're using. This is a more docile version of it, again, because it's just the zip. You'd still have to have another user interaction for the malware to deploy, but something like the HTA file and a link, when they're combined, once you open that image, it executes. Or when you mix a PNG with a JavaScript file, once you open that PNG, the JavaScript file executes. So it can be pretty dangerous, and there's not too many ways to detect it. Now, whenever you unzip it, certain programs will tell you that there was actually data left over after the zip to let you know that something else is there. But most people wouldn't pay attention, / it doesn't always pop up. And pull.
I think you have most of the people either in the room with me here or online sort of flabbergasted. There's some really interesting techniques. Would never even think of these things as being vectors for a way into a system.
Yeah, it's honestly wild. And to tell you the truth, there's a bunch that like I don't even feel comfortable saying out loud. Like it would be socially irresponsible, but it gets so much worse. One of the last videos that I just did, this is kind of on a side tangent a little bit, but I used PowerShell and a custom protocol handler, and it makes it so I can execute PowerShell on your system from my website. Like if you visit my website, I can execute PowerShell on your system. Now, of course, that's only if you're using my custom protocol handler. And I did that on purpose so as, it can't be used maliciously. But there are ways that you can use the Chrome protocol handler and the file protocol handler and exploit them to do the same thing. So I could set it up so if you go to my website, it doesn't matter if you click on anything. If you just simply open the wrong web page, it will execute PowerShell commands on your system. Now, depending on what
Jacoby?
settings you have. Yep.
Do you consider Microsoft Office files to be polyglots since they're in essence zip files?
It is debatable because there's a couple different file types that are basically just hidden zips. I don't know if I would go full polyglot. I think it would be, I don't know, like a masked file, I guess, because it operates the same polyglot. I think would be two files that act differently depending on how they're opened, as opposed to both of those files act the same regardless of how they're opened. So,
Well, if I have
slight
an
distinction.
XLSX file and double click it, it opens up as an Excel workbook. But if I rename the XLSX extension to zip and double click it, it opens up as a zip file.
Okay, that would be a fair argument, moving it towards a polyglot file, and there for sure, I imagine, are exploits to take advantage of that. That's something that's popped up over time. I think most famously with the macros inside of Word documents or whatever else. Macros for a while were used to run code in the background whenever you open up any sort of document or whatever else. So yeah, actually 100%. It could definitely fall in the polyglot family. And then so most of my work is public. I do have it on my GitHub or whatever else. There are, like I said, quite a few exploits or payloads or something else that I've come up with that I just don't post the code to publicly. It doesn't feel socially responsible. But this is just kind of to demonstrate one of the things that you can do with PowerShell, and it's kind of threatening. And this doesn't require admin permissions. You don't have to use execution policy bypass. You don't have to do anything. It takes a couple of seconds of plugging one of these devices into your system to put this into place. Even with persistence, whether that be through your startup folder or some DLL hijacking to get persistence, this will run every single time that your computer starts up. So I have in the background right here, this is just a Discord channel that I use for testing. There are adjustments that need to be done for this because there are different dictation files that you can use to make it more accurate, because admittedly it is not the most accurate, but it is still kind of, I guess we'll say, scary in nature. So this is something called voice logger. So when I go ahead and run this, it's going to go ahead and listen to what I say until I stop talking and there is a break in my speech. And if you look at the bottom left of my screen, it is not perfect, but everything that I say is translated to text and sent straight to Discord live. And there's really nothing you can do to stop it. There's no rules in place. There's no, I mean, by default, referring to default users just using their default computers. Again, speaking to sysadmins, it might be different. You guys might have things that you can definitely put in place for this. I would definitely recommend it. But exit. Thank you. So with that in mind, I just said exit, and it exited because the speech synthesizer module that I'm using from the C#.NET libraries actually listens to what you say, converts it to text, and then I can run that text and look for certain keywords. And if you say certain things, I can run payloads based off of what you say. Whereas I just use it as an exit command to exit the script. You, of course, can make it react based off of someone saying the word bank, or saying anything that's to do with finances, or anything you can imagine that you can trigger any kind of social engineering or whatever techniques that you can imagine.
So could you show? So I understand what you did. Well, I understand practically what you did, but what's the code behind that makes that run? So what are you using there?
Yeah, so that would be just two simple functions. This one right here, even though it's obfuscated currently, is nothing but a Discord upload function. It takes a string, grabs API key. This is currently my Discord webhook. That'll be changed obviously after this video. If you want to pop in a message, say what's up, you can do that. But yeah, so this is simply a Discord upload, and that's it. And then from here, we are going in, add type, assembly name, the system speech, creating an object called recognizer, system speech recognition engine. Like I said, you can load grammar so you can make it more accurate. If you saw it wasn't exactly as accurate as it probably should be, but it's accurate enough to be scary. And then we're just using a while loop. We're going to take the result. Every time there's a pause, it'll pass it through, store it into the result variable, if result. So if there's something there, then, we're just going to start passing it through. And yeah, down here is, if it says notepad, open notepad. If I say exit, then just break and, close out the program. But that could be whatever you want it to be. That could be any trigger word. That could be kill switch, activate, whatever it is that you could think of. But it's just kind of scary because it's instant, it's persistent, and well, it's not as accurate. The details that you could pick up from just listening to a room for a month, yeah, it's kind of scary.
That's amazing.
I won't go into detail on these, but like these are just some of the exfil methods that we use that are probably some of the most common. And again, that's Discord, like you just saw, Dropbox, Obsidian, which is my favorite, again, because it's markup. You pass it data, you can make graphs, display this data in a more human readable format. Twilio Text API, so you can get text to your phone, so you can have data exfilled. I set up a little demo where I just had Wi-Fi passwords sent directly to my phone. And then if you're using something like IFTTT triggers, you could add even more logic to when you grab stuff, pass it on, and you can automate a pretty big, huge process of grabbing intel, processing it, exploiting it, and then whatever the next step is, dependent on situational. But yeah, that's kind of a little deep dive into the different methods we use for either pulling down files, hiding them, obfuscating them, putting them in secret places. As far as what you can do to your computer, that's limitless. I made a whole PowerShell for Hackers series. Again, I try not to showcase anything that could be used too maliciously. So a lot of the stuff that I showcase for these payloads for them to practice are just little things like changing the wallpaper or grabbing their Wi-Fi passwords and saving it to an image and saving that as their wallpaper, or, jump scares. But it gets them the basic concepts of how to use the different tools that I do. So they can try to break it down and reconstruct it. I know I do a lot of code golfing myself, but in any of my readmes for the PowerShell for Hackers, everything is, written full length, commented out, meant to be as educational as possible.
We had a good question that just popped up. Are any of the stuff that you were working on, showing this evening, is it dependent on PowerShell 7? Or does it work with the older versions of PowerShell as well? I mean, maybe a specific command that doesn't exist in PowerShell 5, but...
Right. So that's going to be completely dependent because I've made like hundreds and hundreds of tools.
I meant the stuff that you were showing tonight.
With the stuff situated? No, this will work on PowerShell 5 minimum, like at least ballpark. We were testing on Windows 10, 11. Now, some of the advanced functionality, like, PowerShell 7 shipped out with PS Readline, for example, right? So PS Readline is a really, really cool module. It's allowed me to make some pretty cool tooling. So before, I used to have different functions. So if I wanted to base64 encode a string, I would do base64 ES encode string or decode string or encode file, whatever, and I would use that. So that's just a base64 return of it. Now with PowerShell 7 coming out and PS Readline being a native module that comes with it, there's actually a way to grab what's inside the buffer. So it says start notepad. This is the buffer right here. So instead of actually having to type base64 encode string, I can actually just hit Alt E and it'll encode it in base64 for me. Or if it is base64, it'll encode it back, convert it back. I made the same thing for a tool for aliases. So it's auto alias, anti-alias. So just Alt A will turn an alias to its full form. Or if it's full form, it'll turn into its shortest iterable. Now, those particular functions, which are in some of the stuff I showed, do use PowerShell 7. So those particular ones, yes, would be dependent on 7. But for the most part, most of what I showed is relatively universal. I try to make it so it worked on Windows 10, 7, 10, 11, PowerShell 7, and 5.
So I think you've reached the end of the demos that you wanted to do tonight, right? That's right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So the reason why I didn't want to interrupt if you were trying to do other stuff, but actually, a question just came in the chat that is really the $64,000 question for all the stuff that you've done tonight, which is, so how do you start to mitigate against these attacks without basically just shutting everything down? Right? Because here's the problem. The security team wants to say no X, no Y, no Z, but then the admins in the team go, but I need X, I need Y, I need Z, or else I can't do my job, right? So how do we protect against some of these things? Any tips to offer?
So when it's regarding specifically, we'll say HID attacks, because we're talking about two different things here. I think there's HID attacks specifically, and then there's PowerShell. For something like HID attacks, there's a couple of things that you can mitigate the risk. I showed you the common directories where people drop off files.
Yep.
I'll say on my system that I changed those environment variables so those folders aren't called the same thing. So when they try to drop those files, there's nowhere to drop them to. You know what I mean? So now that might not be practical for everyone, but little things like that to mitigate the risk, whether it be changing the environment variables for certain file locations or doing, MAC address matching for devices, which they do at high level places. Now, that's not always practical when you got people like always coming in, might, bring in, their laptop, whatever to work on, kind of like, how you guys got going on right now. That might be
So-
something more difficult to implement.
Can I ask, how do you change like the temp folder? Like the temp variable doesn't go to somewhere? Where's like, I don't understand. I didn't understand that like, well, like app data does go somewhere.
Yeah, you can, so there's actually an exploit that goes along with that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at our environment variables real quick. These are all of our environment variables. These are the things that hackers like me use to universally navigate your systems. Most
Yeah.
of these don't change. Now, some of these are added, like, you might not have SQLite 3 or Python or whatever else. But if you come up here, oh no, I did change it back. You see ComSpec right here? So ComSpec it just points to where the command exe is. So one of the exploits, or this isn't the full exploit, but it's one of the pivot points of an exploit that we use, is to use the setX function. So with the setX function, you can change environment variables. So I can change just a calc.exe, right? And it changed the value. Now for this, you can't just refresh the PowerShell window. You actually have to set, and then we'll go back to our environment variables. If we come up to here to ComSpec, you'll see ComSpec was changed to calc.exe. So I just changed that environment variable. Now, while that is a way to mitigate these kind of attacks, it's also an attack vector in itself, because now every time that ComSpec variable is called, it's going to be calling to calc.exe. So if you're in something like here, and I think it was to do a break to rem, which is like nothing to nothing, but it'll open the calculator because I placed it in the environment path variable. So you can overwrite those and have them open multiple things at once. I could have it so it still opens CMD, it still opens batch, but it also opens the calculator in the background, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep. So it's not that your idea of like you can change some of that stuff, but there's still ways. Like I just didn't understand like the temp variable and even comes back. Those variables are system wide, and so if you're changing what they're going to, so in some fashion, hey, you could not allow someone to do that. I'm not sure. Like I did not fully understand that concept of trying to prevent that.
That would be a basic mitigation technique that would work against, I think, like one of the bigger threats right now, unfortunately, is all the script kiddies who are running around with flippers. They got them, they're running them on their school systems and everything, right? So the problem is that these kids aren't intelligent. So they're not changing the code. They're not, you know what I mean? They're not making any modifications to make it harder to use. They're just using what they have. And what I'm saying is that all reference material that they have always points to the same 3 directories.
I got you.
Points to the same 3 directories. It's the script kiddies specifically, I guess, like smaller businesses, or even, I don't know what kind of building you guys are currently in right now, but it looks like it might be like a community center of some sorts or something like that where people can walk around. You know what I mean? It's just to mitigate the risks of those kind of people. If you have like a real threat actor that's targeting you, no, absolutely not. That's not going to do it, because I'll just iterate through the environment variables, find out what they are, and then pick the ones that I want. You know what I mean? So that's just it's not a good, honestly, it's not a good one. It's a small one to mitigate against like the script kiddies running around with the flippers right now, to be honest.
Yeah, I got you.
That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out.
So I was just going to say, for the people at home who are watching this and don't have the benefit of seeing the chat that's happening at the same time, so Clem Mesley really brings it home in a good way, which is what Jacoby is saying is, look, these are the default directories that most people are going to look at. That's an excellent place to start your monitoring. So Clem puts in this chat an example of like monitoring temp directory and looking for large amounts of file changes in a short period of time, right? And maybe that flags an alert in a log or to a system like that. So maybe you're not mitigating against the attack, but you're getting visibility to changes on a system that might be raising a red flag a little bit or a warning sign, right? So I think, yeah, like you said, symptoms, right? Symptoms of something that might not be normal.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. So Jacoby, I got another question for you. This is a little bit unplanned, but as I watch you do this stuff tonight, the thing that I thought of was like, how do you go about trying to find a new vector to sort of find a way to use? Like, for example, DNS Text Records. I don't think that for any of us that seems like a common thing. So how do you get sort of your ideas as to where to look for new things? I'm just curious about how the mind works. Like, how do you develop your ideas for new things to try?
Well, for that one specifically, what it comes down to is modifying and holding strings. You know what I mean? Like you're always constantly thinking of ways to do that. And I just happened to be thinking about that at roughly the same time that I was making one of my actual PowerShell modules. And I was thinking about it, and then I was just thinking about how there was all those string containers and how it was actually still treated as an object. And I was like, wait a minute. So then I just did that, and then it was just a matter of finding out how many characters could fit into it. And then once I got, you get that concept, you're like, wait a minute, how can this apply someplace else? So you just start breaking down everything and just seeing if you can apply this over to it. And it's a slow, tedious process. And then a matter of finding things like that is, sometimes I'll put a movie on, or I'll be listening to music, whatever it is, and I will just spend like 4 or 5 hours, and I'll just scour through the registry, or scour through the .NET framework. That's how I found the speech engine, the one that I was talking to and, speaking into Discord. At that time, I was working on a project, which honestly might be going too far. We were talking about ChatGPT earlier. I took it too far. So I use that speech recognizer engine to talk into PowerShell, save it into a variable, pass that variable to ChatGPT, pass the response to Sappy Speak. So it would speak the answer to me. So I'd ask a verbal question and it would verbally respond to me. And then I didn't like the voice because, the ones that come with Windows are ugly. So I found a API online that I could use that I could send the text to and then download an MP3 with a human readable voice. So yeah, little things. It's just super diving into weird places, and literally every single thing that you see, if you don't know what it is for sure, Google it. Every single thing, every single key, every single directory, and it just makes it way easier with ChatGPT, by the way, because you're like, what is this key for, right? Why did they add this key? Because I found one that was called like, there's a key in the registry called "This is a rat." This is a rat. And I was looking, I was like, oh no, did somebody really get me? Did I get got? You know what I mean? I was doing some research, and no, it's a remnant of old Internet Explorer. It's one of the keys that they used to, say what websites you couldn't go to. What websites were blacklisted. But I wouldn't know that if I didn't super dive into it and just Google every single thing I came across. And that's really what it comes down to.
So it really is exactly what was in your command prompt we saw earlier, curiosity, and just taking that curiosity to level
Forever.
that you didn't really expect when you started, but just keep diving and keep looking for different things. Oh.
Yeah, you caught on. That curiosity is everything. Yeah, that's the whole reason of the quote. Yeah, curiosity is everything. But there's so much stuff that I found in the registry, or there's stuff that was left there by accident. Or if you guys know what FOD Helper is? Like if you guys are familiar with FOD Helper, it was just 4 months ago that they patched one of the exploits that I've been using for like 7 years. But I was using FOD Helper as a privilege escalation to get admin rights. And it's 7 years. 7 years I've been using it, and it just went completely under the radar and never did anything. But it was a UAC bypass, is what it was. 7 years strong. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, when you see one of the bypasses finally plugged, Are you happy, or are you like, ah, crap, one of my best vectors is now gone?
It's both, honestly, right? Because of course there's the selfish part of me where it's like, like that was my baby and it's gone now, right? And of course I want to use it because it makes me feel cool. I'm not gonna lie, right? But at
Mhm.
the same time, part of what I do is to try to make them take HID attacks serious. Uh, I just saw a question on how that is. Have you ever leveraged alternate data streams? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you haven't gone down that path yet, by asking, I'm assuming you have. But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. Um,
So I did a pretty terrible job when we did the intro. I didn't give you a chance to talk a little bit about where people can find the things that you do online. So maybe you can help us out. Give us a little plug on where you live online, how they can find you on Twitter and social. And I'm sure you have a GitHub repo you'd like to share, or maybe your YouTube channel. I think people would be interested in what you do and how to follow along.
yeah, absolutely. Did I change it? I was going to show you that button real quick. I don't know if I changed the
Take your
URL
time, man.
for it. I was literally just about to show you that button. Yeah. As far as socials, if you guys want, you can find me on Twitter. I am Jacoby on absolutely everything. I'm Jacoby. GitHub, if you're wanting to check out any of my code. It's crazy. I've had this for just over a year. I started posting code before I always used it as reference. My Flipper Zero Bad USB is currently the biggest bad USB repo on GitHub, which is wild. I remember like a year ago when I was like starring my own posts just so they had one. You know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, it's crazy. But I have a bunch of repositories here. Not all this is even for hacking. Some of it might, some of it, and I just leaked. It's fine. There was a secret project in there. You won't get much from the title, but you'll know it exists now.
Well, if you want to contact us after the video and ask us to blur that out, we'd be
Yeah,
happy.
it's no worries, no worries. It's funny if you see the name and you connect the dots. It's just gonna be extra funny if you somehow figure it out. But yes, this is my YouTube. If you guys want to check me out there, I make a lot of videos going over these different techniques. This is a whole PowerShell for Hackers series. Little things, how to convert text or images to base64. I use a detect mouse movement a lot in a lot of either like my prank payloads or certain recon ones. Either in prank payloads, I want the prank to start as soon as they move their mouse, or in realistic recon ones, I don't want a payload to run until the mouse hasn't moved for a certain amount of time, just to try to indicate someone's not there. Yeah. So those are the main places if you want to follow me. I definitely appreciate that. Oh, right. I forgot Clem. Yeah, that would be a good point. Don't go to the links, LOL. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so my buddy Matzi and I, we actually just started a podcast of our own. We just did the second episode. We're gonna be doing that every Saturday. Right now it's at 5, but we might make it earlier so we can get the European audience in. But yeah, I appreciate you for reminding me. Yeah, it's the Red Blue podcast. I'm Red Team. Matzi is Blue Team. PowerShell. Both of us are PowerShell. He's Blue Team. I'm Red Team. So we just look at current events, cybersecurity events from the perspective of Red and Blue Team.
Awesome. Well, I think, Jacoby, if you're up for it, we'd love to have you come back in the future and blow our minds a little bit more. I kind of feel like I need to throw my computer out right now. There's nothing safe. But what do you guys think? How did Jacoby do tonight, right?
I appreciate you.
Really enjoyed the
Amazing.
presentation. Really enjoyed what you had to share, and your perspectives on how things work is just really refreshing, especially for guys who are dealing with thinking about just as an administration system. And so I just want to say for the people at home, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to have you come and join us in person for a live live meeting, you can find us at Meetup. You can search for rtpsub.com. We also have a YouTube channel, and so maybe you're visiting us from there. But we'd love to have you come, and you can ask your own questions of our presenters and learn some stuff with us. And so please check us out. And we have about somewhere about 130 videos on PowerShell on our channel right now, covering all aspects of PowerShell and system and application administration. So